welcome to Breakthrough Ideas and Training webinar series. I'm Cordell Riley, President of Total Training. It is my pleasure to have Brad Federman with us today. Brad is the COO of F&H Solutions. Brad, welcome to the session.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Super glad to have you. So Brad, if I'm reading your background, just give people a little bit about you. So Brad is an author, a speaker, a consultant with more than 22 years of corporate experience in a lot of different sectors. So Brad, I know I just did that real quickly, but certainly tell the group a little bit more about yourself and F&H Solutions and what you guys do.
Sure. I've been doing this for a long time. I've actually worked internally in companies like Humana Inc., Norrell Services, doing traditional HR work, management development, OD, and I've also worked externally. I cut my teeth at Accenture, which is a great place to learn, and I have actually gone back beyond my undergraduate degree at University of Maryland. I went to Vandy and got my master's degree in human resource development, just to make sure that I'm continuously focusing on learning. I mean, we're about learning. I need to continuously focus on learning, and so I try and put things into my life that cause me to learn along the way. And so I've really gotten into the concept of employee engagement and how it relates to leadership, culture, and branding. And that's largely what our company does. What's different and unique about our organization, and I really like it, is we take a very holistic approach. You know, when you're going to market, there are two strategies you need to have when it comes to your people. You need a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy, just like you do in sports. You have a soccer game, you protect your goal, and you make goals, right?
Yeah.
That's how you win. So you protect your goal by making sure that you have good compensation plans. You protect your goal by making sure that you have a great employee handbook, by making sure that you have good labor relations strategies, and that you're doing the right things to ensure that you're not going to get sued, and that you're also complying with government regulations. That's one half of the picture, and we have a good portion of business that focuses on that. The other half of the picture is you got to win, right? And to win, you need to be able to attract customers to a brand that excites them. So do you have that brand? Have you defined it well? And do you have the leadership and the culture to drive that brand forward, and the people who want to make that come to life in your customers' eyes? That's the other side of the piece of the business that we focus on, which is really about that offensive strategy, scoring points. And when you put those two together, which most people don't work on well together, you try and create alignment between your offensive and defensive strategy. The biggest challenge I see companies having is that they do things in piecemeal. They focus on employee engagement by doing a survey, but then they take actions on things like their employee handbook or their policies that deter from employee engagement and cause noise, creating problems in work, and you don't actually live up to your brand. You don't live up to your promise, and it causes a company to fail or to fall short. We try and ensure that there's alignment between both your offensive and your defensive strategies, and you're going to market in the right way.
Good deal, good deal. Thank you for that. I love that analogy. You know, Brad, something else I heard you talk about, and I certainly adopt this as well, and we got a lot of training professionals on this session with us lifelong learners. I certainly believe that we all need to be proponents of lifelong learning and certainly take every opportunity to sit back and learn when we can. So I'd love to hear you talk about things like that. That's great. You know, Brad, one of the things that you touched on, and I know for this particular focus, obviously we're focusing on employee engagement as a competitive advantage. Now, certainly employee engagement is certainly a word or words that we're hearing a lot more of, but can you just go back to square one, and what does that really mean when you say employee engagement? What's at the root of that, and what does that really mean?
Employee engagement is all about creating a connection between your employee and the organization, or I shouldn't say a connection, multiple connections between an employee and an organization in a way that changes or drives the way that they work, produce, and interact with customers, and their desire to stay and give their all while they're staying. Now, you're not going to create a sense of 20-year employment. Those days are gone. But while someone's there, you want them to be there. And while they're there, you want them to give their all. And I would argue that there are a lot of companies that may have bodies, but the souls have left the building. And that's problematic. And so what you're really trying to do is create that connection between employees and organizations that drive performance. Changes the way people work and what they work on. And then one of the things I want to point out is that most companies look at that from a standpoint of a manager's job. It's their job to make that connection. It's their job to create engagement. While I will say that managers play a significant role in the footprint of employee engagement, they are only one piece.
Yeah.
And when we put all that on their shoulders, we forget a couple of things. One, we forget that managers are employees too, and they need support and help. We forget that managers need tools,
Yeah.
because we leave it just in their hands and say, go. And then the third thing is we create sometimes over time a victim mentality. If I'm not responsible for my engagement, then, and it's all the manager, then if I'm not engaged, it's solely the manager's fault.
Mm-hmm.
When the truth is that employees have an impact on not only themselves, but on their colleagues. And corporate, at the executive level and at the HR realm, need to look at systemic issues that handicap their managers and put employees in a bad situation and bad spot. So it's a shared responsibility. Employee engagement is not about the manager. It's about the manager, it's about employees, it's about teams, and it's about the organization overall. And it needs to be looked at from all of those lenses. So
Yeah. It's about the organization. It's probably the big piece that I got from that. So not just one particular segment. It's about the organization as a whole is kind of what I took away from that one.
sure.
Yeah. So Brad, that brings me back to something that one of my mentors shared with me early on. It kind of talks about, employee engagement, but it uses the analogy that says, at the end of the day, companies and organizations are all essentially recruiting from the same talent pool. If I have an opening position, I'm going to put it out on LinkedIn. I'm going to put it out in these various sectors, but we're all kind of going after the same talent pool. It's what great companies do with those people once they get them in that really makes a difference. And obviously, as we're doing these sessions, we have a bunch of training professionals that are obviously looking to enhance their particular training skills. So if we go back that we all recruit from the same talent pool, it's what we do with people once we get them in that really makes a difference. It's about the organization, and we really want to try to focus on what we're doing from a training perspective. What words of wisdom can you share as it relates to how training has an impact on employee engagement inside of an organization?
I think training has a huge impact if it's done correctly. I think one of the biggest challenges is that people, they do training for training's sake. You need to know when is training appropriate, when is it not appropriate. I just got done with a conversation with a potential client, and I may have talked myself out of a job, but but they wanted to do training for an individual. And when I actually asked what was going on, it was clear that it wasn't skills, it wasn't knowledge. It was really about that person's attitude and mindset and habit structures that have been built over the last probably 40 years. And when you look at a situation like that, you're looking at a long-term change and you're looking at coaching. So
Mm-hmm.
coaching is a much more appropriate solution for this person than training. And so they have to make a decision, are we willing to invest that much into that individual, to help them? And I would rather them either invest in that individual or let the person go than spend time on training that won't work.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing holds true with things like one aspect of engagement is diversity and inclusion. The more inclusive of an environment you have, where people feel valued and respected on a daily, consistent basis, the stronger company you have. It performs better. People do a lot of compliance training around diversity. They do a lot of training around inclusion when it's not really supported by an organization. And when you do that, Harvard just put out a study that shows that a lot of that training is wasted money, millions of dollars wasted money. Now, the flip side is McKinsey just came out with a study that demonstrates that when a company takes it seriously, when a company actually does things that support inclusion from a strategy perspective, like creating a diverse board of directors, really putting meat on the bones, and then they train. What ends up happening is you have I think it was a 50% higher return on equity and a 14% higher EBIT. So it makes a huge difference if it's done right, but it's an investment in who you are that has to be supported by the organization, by executives, and by the strategy of the company. It can't be training for training's sake.
Yeah. Well, great point, Brad. And that was a perfect segue into one other thing I wanted to talk with you about. Training Magazine recently came out with kind of the top 5 trends in training and development for 2015. And one you touched on was training aligned with business goals, not just training for the sake of training, but training that's really aligned with the strategy of the organization. And how does it tie in? So it really enhances, improves where the business is trying to go. So it's a perfect comment on that. But one of the other things I wanted to get your take on, they also talked about this trend, adaptive learning. not just saying that everybody's going to go through the same type of training, but it's going to adapt to who the person is, what they need to learn, what they need to go through. And it talked about how that really engages the millennials because, the millennials certainly want things different than the days that, when I was learning things. And it
Sure.
also just talked about really, enhancing employee engagement. So can you talk about this trend of adaptive learning, how this kind of plays into employee engagement?
Sure. I mean, we've got a lot of trends, and adaptive learning is one of them. I think it's a positive trend. People want to feel like their time is well used, and they want to feel like they're getting something of value in their experience. I would argue that now you've got millennials that are not only entering the workforce that have seen what has happened to their parents or their parents' friends, which really colors the way they look at the work environment. They also have a blurred line when it comes to personal and professional. Work is a vehicle towards their personal goals, right? Whereas you used to have the good corporate citizen, job is the job, I'm going to be loyal, doesn't exist anymore. So you've got a lot going on. Millennials are acutely aware of the fact that they have a 30 to 50-year window for their career.
Hmm.
And they want to stay relevant, and they want to stay sharp. And if the training is adaptive to them and what they need to be able to do that, then I think it's positive. I also think it needs to take an effect where people are, largely because they grew up with Facebook and everything else, which was all about, hey, guess what? All that technology we have, social media, it's all about me. That's how they grow up, and that's okay. But it means that they want to put their fingerprint, they want to put their passion into whatever they do. Same with training. They want training to be reflective of who they are, where they are, and what they want. And it's only going to get more and more relevant. My son, who's 12 years old, last Christmas took his Christmas money and he actually ordered socks online, which he designed, Nike socks, he designed and had made in China. So he has the only design that exists of those socks out of anybody in the world.
Yeah,
And when
yeah,
you grow up and you have the capability to create your own, basically your own personalized product, when you go into work, you don't respond to boxes very well.
yeah,
And one of the boxes we've had is training. It's one size fits all. Go through it because you have to. Here's the checklist.
yeah.
And the more we move away from that, and the more that we're able to connect with people at their level, the better. Now, I would argue there's two types of adaptive learning. One, which we're looking at from technology standpoint,
Hmm.
okay, you get what you need when you need it. The other one is, instead of creating prescriptive training, here are the 5 steps to do this. Here are the 10 steps to do that. The training that deals with people's personal attitudes, beliefs, and how it reflects in their work, real personal growth, personalized experiences that don't even have to be technology based. And in some cases, technology works really well. In other cases, live works even better.
Yeah.
But the way it's designed, the way it's developed, has to connect with people in their head and in their heart, and really help them understand themselves and how they come across to other people and how it reflects in their work. That is an adaptive learning, I think, that's we often forget. We get caught in the prescriptive learning, and we think that that's what matters. Well, people grow because they have ahas. People grow because their strength is strengthened as an individual. And
Yeah.
when we create steps and we create standards, what we ask people to do is to hit a minimum. And so what they do is they start reaching for the floor. When
Yeah.
we build a culture that says, here's who we want to be, here's what we want to be to our customers, how can each of us get there? Then we ask people to reach for the ceiling. And that's powerful. That's when your brand is completely different than everybody else's.
Yeah, yeah. Well, great, great. I love that. And also, I love the story about the socks for your son. Do you like the socks? Do they turned out well?
I like the socks. They're a little loud for me, but he likes wearing bright colored socks, different colors and patterns and designs, and he enjoys it. So more power to him. I love the individuality.
There you go. There you go. To your point, the message there is the individuality. Allow me to kind of adapt to whatever my learning style is, what type of socks I want. That's going to best suit what I need at this point in time. So that's a great point. So Brad, back to kind of the topic at hand here. Obviously, engagement as a competitive advantage. We've talked about training and different things that we're seeing from a training perspective. Again, you got a group of training professionals that are listening to this call today. So if you wanted to kind of give some top tips, some things that you've seen throughout your career for people that really want to focus on employee engagement, that really want to tie training into it, what kind of tips or messages would you kind of boil some of these things down to that our audience can take away to they kind of go back to their organizations and work with here?
Well, the first one, excuse me, is know what you're trying to accomplish. I think too many times people jump into something because it's exciting, because it's the fad, it's popular, and they don't understand what they're trying to accomplish. Whenever you're doing something, tie it to a set of goals and make sure it's connected to what your business is trying to accomplish. That's
Yeah.
one. I think the second thing is make sure you have real support. I think too many times people, I get calls in to do a lot of work around training or engagement, and the executive team is really not on board. Okay, and I say that because the best way to determine that is if the engagement survey comes back and your executive team is the problem, are they prepared to make changes in the way they behave and operate the company?
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, before you ask that question, you hear, of course we're supported. But if you ask the question that way, there are a lot of executive teams that aren't ready for that. And that's true support. We're in the game. We're ready ourselves. We'll do what we need to do to make that shift. That's what you need to look at. Okay. And then I think the other thing is when you follow up with training of any kind, I would argue that it needs to be realistic. It needs to be challenging and safe to a point. See, we've spent years creating learning that's about safety.
Mm-hmm.
We've created learning that's all about comfort. And we've segmented things. So when you learn about listening skills, you have these very fixated listening skills experiences or role plays that aren't real, that force you to use a very specific skill that's fairly, what I would argue, easy for you to adapt to for the training class. And then when you get back into work and you've got distractions, and you've got agendas, and you've got goals, and then you still have to do that listening skill, people just don't do it,
Yeah.
right? And so you've got to create experiences that push people. So for instance, we're doing a course that's a sales training course right now. And one of the very first things we're doing is we have these salespeople come in, and after we've done some basic content training and they're aware of what we want them to do, and we know that they're comfortable with that skill set, we actually put them in a sales simulation, and we create 5 prospects, and they actually have to make prospecting calls to each of those 5 prospects and try and earn an appointment with each one of them. Now, here's the deal. The people that are the prospects are told to respond in kind as if you were truly a prospect. No role. Yes, there's content. You need to know the company you're representing. You need to know certain basic facts. But in terms of the experience, you will be yourself. Okay? That's how we want you to act. And so when they get calls, if I do something that earns your trust, respond in kind. If I do something that makes you uncomfortable, respond in kind. And so at the end of that experience, it's very interesting because after they've done all 5 prospecting calls, they may have only earned 1 appointment.
Yeah.
And they're going to get feedback from each of those prospects that tells them why. What did you do to me that made me not want to have the appointment? What did you do with me that made me want to have the appointment? And then I get to look at each of the different personalities, and I begin to realize how much I have to shift based on who's on the call with me, which means I have to get very good at reading them, and I'm not as good as I thought I was. And so then you continue to build a simulation that's that realistic and that challenging, that takes days, a couple of days, as opposed to an hour. I think one of the things that people want to do is in 1 hour these days, they want to change people. They want to give people the ultimate skill set. You can be a leader in an hour. You can be the best salesperson in an hour. Everyone's looking for the silver bullet. There's no silver bullet. It's called work. It's called
Yeah.
hard work. It's called risk. It's called challenge. People don't learn because it's safe. Think about the most the most learning you've ever had in your life. The most learning you've ever had in your life is when you've been uncomfortable. It
Yeah.
forces you out of your comfort zone. So you want to create a safe environment where it doesn't have implications on someone's career, where they can walk out even if they have a difficult experience, they're still okay. But you've got to get people out of their comfort zone. You've got to challenge them because that's the only way people learn, and that takes time.
Yeah. Well, safe but challenging is what I got from that, Brad. Great point there. Great point. Brad, you've shared a lot of great things, and thank you again for your time. A lot of great information. I'm sure our audience is
Thank
very
you.
appreciative of this. I know you have an offer that you wanted to make available to our audience. You want to tell everybody what your offer is for our group here?
Sure, we're coming out with another book. I've written a book on employee engagement, and then I followed up with a chapter in a career development book. And now we're coming out with another book called Jumpstart, 50 Ways to Engage Your Team. And so that's our offer. We're more than willing to give people that book and happy to give people that book. What's great about that book is it's practical. It's straightforward. And it basically it helps you tie your culture and engagement to everyday activities at work. So how do I tie it into my meetings? How do I do this with my staff on a weekly or daily or monthly basis? How do I do something that drives where we want to go without having to create an event around it? How can I tie it into the everyday fabric of our company so it becomes part of our culture? That's what the book's about. Great concept, great idea, very practical. It'll help you right away.
Good to go. How does everybody get the book, Brad?
They need to contact me. Do you want me to give contact information?
That would be great. That would be
All
great.
right. It's B Federman. That's F as in Frank, E, D as in David, ERMAN at FHsolutionsgroup.com. Or you can call us. Call me at 901-291-1547. That's 901-291-1547. All right.
Good.
Fantastic.
Thank you for the offer. Thank you again for your time, Brad. Lots of great information. Thank our audience for joining us again. Hopefully you found this session to be very helpful and very informative. Please come back and join us for other sessions. And thank you for your time and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.